has been a long time since your first film, Maria Full of Grace, and now The Forgiveness of Blood. Why is there such a long break between the two movies?
Well, after Maria Full of Grace, which had a lot of success, and then I wrote another movie after that and was very excited to make it, and ran into the difficulties of getting a movie made in the Hollywood system and in the studio. And I like to do movies that are maybe more challenging, that take place in countries outside the United States, and movies that feel very real, so maybe not always working with huge mega movie stars. And it's challenging to get those movies made financially. So I had various films that I wanted to make that just didn't align. And I got the idea to make this film, The Forgiveness of Blood, in Albania. I was fascinated with Albania. And because it's a small country and relatively speaking inexpensive, it was amazingly much easier to get the funding to go off and make this movie in Albania.
Let's talk about your interest in movies which are not based in America.
I think that what makes these stories appealing to me is that it's a chance to go out and visit some corner of the world that I know nothing about, and learn something, and be a fly on the wall and ask questions and learn something, and then take what I've learned and find a way. It's an interesting challenge to take all this journalistic information and create a fictional story out of it, so that people feel like for 2 hours they have been living in this country that they knew nothing about, and they come out having this sort of cross-cultural experience based on going to the movies. I think that's exciting. I'm very interested in other people's cultures. As a teenager, I lived with a family in France for a summer, and then a family in Italy for a summer, and I went to Mexico, and I learned all these different languages, and it was very exciting to be thrown into a completely different culture, and everything's new, and there's different food and different way of doing things, and it's like a puzzle that you're trying to figure out, and everything is exciting, and that's fun to do as part of the filmmaking process as well, because saying that, oh, I'm making this movie, it sort of gives me permission to then ask a whole bunch of questions.
From an outsider's perspective, do you feel that you've got a different perspective or view to the stories in Albania or Colombia?
I think when you're from the outside, that you have a different point of view than if you're from the culture. There's no question that Colombians make movies about the drug trade, and there's no question that Albanians make movies about blood feuds. But I do it differently than they would do it, because I'm coming in from outside, and so I'm seeing different things, and I have a different focus. So for example, as I say, there have been other movies in Albania about blood feuds, but they never had a story that was told from the point of view, as mine is, of a 17-year-old boy who has to face the consequences of his father being accused of killing someone. And that it means that here's this kid who's full of life and trying to get a girl's cell phone number, and he's putting photos up on Facebook, and he's totally modern and full of energy. Suddenly, because his family now owes a life to another family, they're in a feud because his father has supposedly killed someone, his life is turned upside down. And so that was a way into a story about a feud that Albanian filmmakers hadn't done before. For whatever reason, I don't know, but I think for me, I was able to see this phenomenon of feuds as not just a story about a feud, but a story about the confrontation of the modern and the traditional, and how those two things are bumping up against each other in Albania right now. And maybe I saw that because I was coming in from the outside, where an Albanian filmmaker might just make a story about a feud, not about this sort of larger problem of how the country is modernizing.
Tell me about the research process of this movie. What did you come across? What did you learn?
What makes this story interesting to me is the fact precisely that it's not just about a feud, that it is a story about these strange combinations and juxtapositions that you get when a culture or a society is in transition. So Albania was communist for 45 years, and then in the early 90s, communism came to an end. And for the last 20 years, they've been transitioning to democracy and to capitalism. And what that means is that you have all sorts of strange combinations of things. For example, carts drawn by horses, where people are riding around with a horse and cart, but they're talking on a cell phone. Or kids playing video games and sending text messages from their house, but they're in the house because they're stuck in a feud and they can't leave the house. That is fascinating. That's an aspect of this transition that makes Albania a really, really strange and complicated place. There are all sorts of surprises that come up when I was making a movie in Albania, but one of the biggest, I guess, was really, it was just fascinating what a culture of honor and pride it is, how important the notion of honor is. And that happens, you see that in all sorts of ways. For example, as a foreigner, when I am in Albania, I am immediately officially a guest. And so everyone wants to treat me very well, and I'm invited to people's houses, or if I'm doing research, and I had an experience where I was doing research and I went to a village and met someone on the street, and 5 minutes later I was in his living room and he's serving me tea and brandy, and I spent hours, and that is because there's great honor in receiving the guest, and that's very powerful. At the same time, it also means that you have to protect your honor and your pride if someone insults you. And a murder is a form of insult. So if my brother is murdered, it means that my whole family has had their honor stained. And it's not just that I get to take justice into my hands and get revenge by killing someone, but in a way I'm almost obligated to, because until I take revenge for the killing of my brother, my whole family is viewed as having less honor in the village. So maybe when I go to the pub and I have drinks, I'm served in a different way as a sign to everyone that I still haven't cleared this debt. And that's for me, fascinating.
Can you tell me about the challenges you faced while making this movie in Albania?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges of making the movie in Albania was finding the actors for the film. This is a movie that is primarily about a 17-year-old boy and his 14-year-old sister. So these are two kids, and there just aren't professional teenage actors in Albania. It just doesn't exist. And so to find the kids for the movie, I had to go from school to school. And for about 6 months, we went to something like 50 different schools, and we auditioned like 3,000 kids. And it was really a long, long road to find these two amazing kids who were in the movie. And it was very, very exciting when we finally found them. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. It's just, you sing with joy when you finally find this kid, like they're gonna be on screen, and they really carry the film. And in the process of doing that, I interview all these kids, and the other 5,998 kids who aren't in the movie are still kids that I learned something from about what it's like to be a teenager in Albania today. So that's also fascinating. I picked these two kids to be in the movie because they were phenomenal. You watch them on screen and they light up the screen, and the girl has a face that you fall in love with and you just want to see her succeed. And she's, on the one hand, she's very strong, and on the other hand, she's innocent and she's just like a little girl. And that combination is just magical. And the boy he has a real sense of humor and a joy about him. And I think that was really important for the character, because the question is, okay, what is this situation going to do to this spark that he has? And so you root for him, you hope that he survives intact. There are a few films that get made in Albania every year, but it's not a huge film industry. And I think the thing that I'll take away from filming in Albania is the incredible sense of hospitality that people had. We were in a small town in northern Albania, and people were fascinated with the idea that we're making a movie, and everyone wanted to be involved. And everyone was there and helpful and curious, and so it really felt like by the time we wrapped production, we felt like we were part of that village, and they really had made us feel very, very at home.
You're known for working with non-professional actors. Is there a reason why you intentionally choose these actors to work with?
For me, what's the most important is having actors who give a performance that feels real, so that you, in a way, almost forget you're watching a movie. You feel like you're in the real world for 2 hours when you're in the movie theater. And I use a combination of actors who have never acted before and have no professional training, and actors who went to school and have done it their whole lives. It just really depends on people being able to feel real. And sometimes people who have no formal training, never ever done it before, they don't think as much, and so it just comes kind of automatically. And that's the case with all these kids that are in this movie. They feel like the real thing. And yet when I'm directing them, they are incredibly smart, and if I give them, if I say cut, okay, no, I need to do it again, and I need it to be a little different, they can hear what I'm saying and make an adjustment and do it again, and it's like working with the greatest professional.
What is the part of the story that resonates with you the most?
Well, there are a lot of parts of the movie that resonate with me, because when I look at it, I remember some conversation that I had that inspired the scene. Most of the scenes in the movie are inspired by actual stories that people told me. So, for example, one of the scenes, one of the things that was really important to capture was what happens after someone's killed in Albania. People would say, I had one person say, the first thing that we do is go straight home and lock the doors and lock the windows, and we get a friend to go and get our children from school and bring them home, and everyone stays inside of the house. And then at night, the friends come over, and we drink a lot of tea and smoke a lot of cigarettes, and there are these long conversations about what does this mean that someone killed someone else? What does the law say? What does the tradition say? How should we act, and how long should we stay in the house? And I just imagined this room full of cigarette smoke. And when we went to go film that scene, I used real mediators, these old men who have decades of experience, and we brought them into the living room, and they pulled out their cigarettes, and we pulled out the brandy, and they just got into these long conversations, and they made it feel like the real thing. You feel like you're there in Albania.
What do you hope that the audience would take away from this movie?
I think the movie, on the one hand, it's very specific. It's Albania. You've never seen anything like that. It doesn't have any equivalent. But on the other hand, it is a universal story that is about two teenage kids who are growing up and put in a very adult situation, and a conflict between generations. And it's a story about justice and what happens when a parent commits a crime and the children have to suffer the consequences. And so even though Albania is this remote country that you may never have gone to, I think people can relate to it for all of these universal themes that are in the film. I think that makes it interesting.